Hi everyone, and welcome to the slam presentation on Which Witch is Witchier. This short video will include an introduction to a world that is closer than you might think, exploding the myths and shining a light on the truths of the Wiccan culture. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at the email listed below. Let's get started. The definition of Wicca is defined by Merriam-Webster as a religion influenced by pre-Christian beliefs and practices of Western Europe that affirms the existence of supernatural powers like magic and of both male and female deities who inhere in nature and emphasize ritual observance of seasonal and life cycles. Here we can discuss how it's a little bit different than the Abrahamic faiths. For one, there is multiple gods. Two, it does kind of go into more of the supernatural powers where the gods or goddesses, yes, they're powerful, but they're not all powerful. They're kind of there to help explain what is going on in the world. And these supernatural powers like magic can come from people themselves. The main rule of Wicca is the golden rule, and it says, "And it harm none, do what ye will." And means if it harm none is what that means. It is an old terminology, and it's basically saying if it doesn't harm anyone or anything, go ahead and do it. But at the same time, if it does, like, don't do it. It's the golden rule. It's another form of do unto others as you would do to yourself. So if you wouldn't want someone hitting you, don't hit others. Something of that nature, but this is a little more Old English, and it's something that is taught and kind of exemplified through Wiccan nature. There is one exception, of course, because there's an exception to every rule, and we will go over that later in the slides. Now, a little bit of history about Wicca. There's these four main people. There's Margaret Murray, who is the lady who is sitting with a book. The crazy scientist-looking gentleman is Gerald Gardner. Aleister Crowley is the bald man down in the left corner, and then Sybil Leek is the actress-looking woman. Now, Margaret Murray, she kind of created the modern rituals or practices and the prayers of Wicca. She was a first-wave feminist, Egyptologist, anthropologist, and folklorist. She wrote several books on medieval religions centered around witch cults, and she created this starting in 1921, so she was a little bit earlier than the rest of who we're going to talk about. In 1954, we have Gerald Gardner. He created a book called Witchcraft Today, and that kind of described Wicca and gave Wicca the name that it has. Wicca is spelled with two C's, whereas previously it was with one. He created it to where it had the two. And that word is an Old Scots English word meaning wise people. And because of the book he created and kind of the fact that he kind of gave it the name that it has, he is considered the father of Wicca. And around that time, and I believe, hold on, let me find it. Yeah, in 1947, he met Aleister Crowley, and they kind of bounced ideas off of each other. Crowley told Gardner, like, hey, let's formally write out these rituals and all of these ideas and put them into a book. But Gardner, of course, got the name of the father of Wicca. Sybil Leek, in the late 1940s, she came over to America and popularized Wicca and brought several ideas from England about Wicca into American culture, and she's the one that brought it to where it is today, I would say. Speaking of today's Wicca, it officially became recognized in 1986 here in the US. That's about 40 years after Sybil Leek came here to America with the Wiccan culture. In 2005, the U.S. Army Sergeant Patrick D. Stewart became the first Wiccan serving in the U.S. military to die in combat. Now, some would say that's really late considering it was an official religion in 1986, but because Wiccans are kind of, they want to not necessarily hide that they're Wiccans, but keep it to themselves. It's not a very out there religion. It's kind of just behind closed doors. They do their rituals, they have their altars, and we'll go over all of that in later slides. But because of that aspect, there could have been Wiccans that did die in combat before Sergeant Stewart, but we don't know. The number of practicing Wiccans in the US, as it can be read, it reports anywhere between 300,000 and 3 million practitioners, and this is a difficult number to estimate because, like I just said, Wiccans don't really like to go out there and say, oh, hello, I'm here, I'm Wiccan. There's a few people who will, of course, including me, but many people kind of like to keep that to themselves. It's something they don't really want to mention, and that makes it difficult to estimate. The difference between witch and Wiccan. This is a fun topic for me because it's very similar to if someone were to call an Irish person a Scots person. They don't like it. They're two very different cultures, and it's similar to Wiccan and witch. However, witches do draw from Wicca. They draw their magic or their witchcraft from what they would say is the gods and goddesses of Wicca, where Wiccans kind of live more in harmony with nature. They don't seek to harness that magic or that natural energy. Their Wiccans are more there to help not only themselves, but to also help the world. Where witches sometimes are more for themselves. I don't want to say everyone's like that because that's not very nice of me to assume. It's more of a they're out here practicing magic where Wiccans are not. Wiccans are more prayers, more rituals, things of that nature, and that's the two biggest differences between Wiccans and witches. Now, there are different cultures within Wicca, just like how in Christianity there is different cultures, such as Roman Catholic, Irish Catholic, non-denominational. Wicca has 7 main cultures, and out of these cultures, you don't have to identify as a single one. You can be multiple, such as, for example, I am lunar bound and earth bound. So I practice with the lunar cycle, and then I also do use crystals in some of my rituals. Now, rituals are kind of like prayers, reflecting, meditations, things of that nature. And there's earthbound, lunarbound, waterbound, firebound, bloodbound, and spiritbound. Out of these, bloodbound is kind of known as the dark magic. It's kind of looked down upon in a Wiccan group because they're using animal sacrifices, their own bodies. They are drawing their ritual and what they would say as powers from blood. And the golden rule is if it harm none, then do it. And that would be harming, if not themselves, then others. So it's seen as kind of dark magic and kind of just don't do it. But at the same time, it's not something that's the Wiccan culture is kind of just going to go get out because they don't want others judging them for what they do. So they're not going to judge the people who do practice bloodbound Wicca, and they're just going to say, you stay over there, don't associate with us. Spiritbound is more on spirits, and firebound and waterbound, as said with the title. It's waterbound, they collect water, fire has candles and burnings. And I already mentioned earth and lunarbound, but those are the 7 main cultures of Wicca. Now, practicing, you can either do it alone or in a group. Our age group is more likely to be alone because we travel a lot. We're going back and forth and between work and home and college, and we're trying to figure ourselves out. And it's a little hard to go ahead and get in a group, or another word would be coven. That is what they prefer to be called. It's hard to be in that coven if you're moving from place to place. Covens are kind of situated in very specific areas, and they are typically led by a main Wiccan who is considered the high priest or high priestess. And it is a group of 2 or more Wiccans that worship similar gods or goddesses, and they perform their rituals together. Whereas practicing alone, you don't have to rely on anyone else to do it with you. You can just sit there and go, I wish to do this ritual tonight by myself. You don't have to get people together to do it. So it's just kind of a what your preference is. Now, the gods and goddesses, they're known for having a lot, a lot of gods and goddesses. And the followers, what they would do in their research on their steps to become Wiccan, because you can't just claim I'm Wiccan today after watching this video. Honestly, you have to do a lot of research. I personally am still doing my own research on it and just recently started calling myself officially a Wiccan. But before that, I have done 3 years of research where I've just started to find my goddess, and they have a lot. It's a lot of gods and goddesses where you have to go through and figure out which one you really associate the most with and which one can bring you on that path to become more one with nature. That is what they pull from the gods, is who would best help me on this path. Now, altars, they are set aside for the gods or goddesses. It's to make the practitioner feel more connected with whoever they choose to follow. It's seen as a significant step in the beginning of becoming a Wiccan because it takes so many years to figure out which area you're wanting to focus on, which god or goddess you want to focus on, and then you have to sit there and figure out what that god or goddess enjoys the most in their altars is. And altars are very personal. It's not for the whole world to see. And I have some pictures of the stereotypical or standard altars, but it's something that you kind of keep for yourself. It's not for everyone to see. Now, a Book of Shadows. It's a collection of spells and rituals, and it is central to the Wiccan practice. It's almost like your own personal diary of spells and rituals that you have on this path to becoming more one with nature. It kind of came from Gardner, and he started writing all of these spells and rituals that he had saw and thought these would be great to have and to have this record. And he then started to require initiates to create their own, and it's kind of just been passed down, is where if you start looking at becoming Wiccan, you look at these different rituals that are out there, you hear them from other Wiccans, and you go, oh, that'd be good for me to have, and you write it in this book, and you keep it, and it's yours, and you don't share it, unless it's with family members. Now, this is how the knowledge is passed down. Books of Shadows are passed through the generations, and in these books you can add to them, or you can just keep it the same with whatever's in there. Now, stereotypes, they worship the devil, they're goth, they're hippies, they're witches, they do human sacrifices, they all do dark magic. Stereotypes are stereotypes. Some people, yes, fill these names or fill what is happening here, but not everyone does. Personally, I don't fit anything on this list. At least I don't think I do. I do know some of my Wiccan friends. They are a little more gothic, but they wouldn't consider themselves goth. But I don't know of any Wiccans that worship the devil. Some do practice dark magic, as mentioned before. That's bloodbound, but the Wiccan culture kind of wants them to go away and kind of just stick in their little corner. And the rest, again, as I mentioned, is not everyone is that way. It's just like stereotypes of any culture. These are my references that I got all of my information from. This is not including getting my information from fellow Wiccans where I asked them for some help since I am still in the process of doing some of my research. But I would especially like to thank Mark Mullinax for pushing me to do this, as well as Chris Brignoli, who told me that I should also do this presentation. And then Skylar McClung and Taylor Brewer are two very close friends of mine who are in the Wiccan culture who helped me throughout this entire process. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at madelineboles1@mhu.edu.